Coming up, yes or no on number 3. Will a tax cap hurt or help Massachusetts? And a citizen's guide to Central America is all next.
This is Weekend with Dave Finnegan for Saturday, October 25th, 1986.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again here to Weekend Saturday night. This is the week of Bruce Hurst, previously an unheralded pitcher in the Red Sox stable, no more. He's now becoming a national hero in the World Series. And tonight, maybe Roger Clemens puts the cap on it. We'll find out. In Central America this week, too, big news. You remember it was just about 10 days ago that the United States government said they didn't know why Gene Hassenfuss and those other folks were in Central America after all. Today, Hassenfuss stands up and he says, I thought I was working for the government all along. At least that's what the CIA guy told me who gave me this pass to come here. Now, who's telling the truth down there, do you think? We'll find out, I'm sure, in the trial days to come. And coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll find out, too, what version of a tax cap will survive here in Massachusetts. We've got a pretty lively debate for you between Barbara Anderson and Susan Shaer. All of that is coming up right after this. Come on back. In 1980, the Massachusetts taxpayers sent a strong message to the legislature in the form of Proposition 2.5, which firmly restricted the increase of property taxes, one of the burdens that helped create the nickname Taxachusetts. Well, the latest call for a tax cap on income is ballot question number 3. It's calling for a limit in taxes to the rate of the increase in personal income. Now, the opponents to the tax cap say that the reduction in revenues will endanger toxic waste cleanup efforts, reduce the state's ability to provide low-income housing, and it'll restrict other state services that are already threatened by federal cutbacks. Well, since that time, the ballot question, that is, the state legislature has swung into action, and now there is another version of the tax cap sponsored by them. Meet two people who have widely divergent views, however, on this tax cap. Barbara Anderson is here with us from the Citizens for Limited Taxation, and Susan Shaer is here with us. She is the president of the League of Women Voters here in Massachusetts. Barbara, you carry the burden here. You want to enact a new law. Tell us what the law says and why you think it's in the best interest of the Commonwealth.
The law says the state tax revenues will not go up any faster than the growth in Massachusetts working people's wages and salaries averaged over 3 years. So if people vote yes on question 3, they're telling the state that they don't want state tax revenues to go up any faster than the rate of growth of wages and salaries averaged over 3 years. If they vote no, they are voting for no limit on the state tax revenue increase.
All right. Susan, why is that unreasonable, and why does your group say that we ought to vote no on question 3?
Well, the Vote No Coalition is made up of a large number of groups that have been working toward tax reform in many areas, and as you mentioned, we now have legislation, and the governor has signed legislation that is a tax cap and that will immediately repeal the surtax. We have been saying, the Vote No Coalition has been saying for a long time, that the CLT proposal is out of date, inflexible, and will raise taxes. And now we have proof that that is true. The voters on November 4th have an option and a choice, and they can vote no on question 3 and have a much more flexible tax cap and one that repeals the surtax immediately.
Barbara, these are pretty strong criticisms here. You're out of date, and you're actually going to raise taxes if your proposition prevails.
Don't forget inflexible.
Inflexible,
okay.
All right, I'll add the 3.
Out of date, as opposed to out of date, we are out in the open. Our tax limit has been out there for 1.5 years, which is how long it takes to do an initiative petition on any subject, so everybody knows that. People have had a chance to look at it, analyze it, run computer runs on it to see what the impact would have been, will be. Everyone knows what's in our cap because it's been there. The cap that was put together by the legislature was thrown together last week by conferees in a conference committee. No public hearings. Nobody saw the bill till it came out on the floor. They voted on it without knowing what they were voting upon. It's a 66-page document, cut and paste job, and we'll never even have a chance to finish analyzing it till long after the election, and I assume that people will not buy this quote-unquote pagan approach.
What's the difference between the tax cap that's enacted by the legislature, which you support, and the tax cap that would be in vogue if this referendum were to pass? Is there a simple difference you can tell us about?
Well, nothing in taxes is simple. That's the first thing. And it is a comprehensive tax package. It hasn't been thrown together. The original idea for any kind of a tax cap or spending limit came from the Senate side 3 years ago. So the ideas have been floating. It hasn't been thrown together. The major difference is that it will repeal the surtax immediately. If question 3 passes on November 4th, then the repeal would be outdated and taxes would come back in.
That isn't accurate. That isn't accurate. They can't fight us on the issue. I mean, unless they want to say, you're wrong, Barbara, state tax revenue should go up faster than the rate of growth of wages and salaries, they can't take us on the issue or the numbers. So instead they're trying to confuse the voters by taking the surtax repeal, which was in the petition and which only passed because we got all those signatures on it, they're trying to make it retroactive back to January 1st of last year, so that technically our petition would bring it back for 1 year at half the rate. In fact, legislative leaders have pledged to again repeal the surtax. Everybody in the world is in favor of repealing the surtax back to last year.
Well, now, wait a minute. Barbara has gone on record as saying that she wasn't in favor of repealing the surtax. Somewhere along the line,
I repealed the surtax. I mean, it's the CLT members who went out and got those signatures who got the surtax repealed. The League was against surtax repeal. The governor was against it. The legislature was against it. Everyone was against it till we got 137,000 signatures. So nobody is going to believe you when you say that I'm against surtax repeal.
Well, the interesting thing about getting those signatures, Dave, is that when you collect signatures and then you find that there is movement in the legislature, and as soon as the signatures were filed, a phase out of the repeal of the surtax was enacted into law.
Coincidentally,
now, there were other people who were also passing around initiative petitions last year. One was on acid rain. And when they got their signatures, then the legislature also acted, and they took it off as an initiative petition binding question and made it an advisory question. Barbara and the CLT folks could have seen that there was movement in the legislature, worked with them to have a more progressive, comprehensive tax package.
In fact, that was
once
tried.
They got movement.
Yes, see, the Mass High-Tech Council did try that. The Mass High-Tech Council went out and worked for 1 full year with the governor and legislature trying to get a legislative version through. They finally gave up in August and came with us and are now fully supporting Question 3 along with the Mass Taxpayers Foundation and a couple of large changes.
Let me get an answer to my earlier question, though,
yes.
Susan. What is the difference if the legislative tax limit, just stick with that, not the surtax piece, the tax limitation piece, if it prevails, what is the difference between that piece of legislation and the referendum proposed by CLT?
Well, the largest single difference is that the legislative Dukakis cap allows for a stabilization fund. The CLT literature asks for a stabilization fund, but the initiative petition doesn't
Tell us what a
include one.
stabilization fund is.
It allows for a pool of money for emergencies and to pay for those services that you mentioned originally, the pressing needs for cleaning up toxic waste and for bond packages and the kinds of emergencies.
If we need money for that, why do we give back all of the money that we had in the surplus? That is to say, if we need money for low-income housing and emergency services, why didn't we just segregate that into a pool and not give it back to the taxpayer?
Well, it's sometimes difficult to know what you're going to need the money for. We know that we're going to get federal cutbacks. We don't always know what area they're going to be in. We don't know what kind of emergencies we're going to have. We also know that the communities, because of the cutbacks in 2.5, need to have a lot more local aid. They need help in bonding for capital improvements.
Well, all the more reason it would seem to me to keep that money in reserve.
Yeah, well,
maybe
David, you have to understand. Can I have a turn? David, the reason that there...
Do you have a stabilization fund in your operation?
No, because with an initiative petition, as everybody knows, and certainly the League knows, you're not allowed to appropriate money. So if we could have put one in, for the same reason we couldn't force local aid with our initiative petition on Prop 2.5, you can't make them spend money a certain way. You can just tell them how much they can take. However, there's nothing in our petition that says they can't have a stabilization fund. You want one? Get one through the legislature. Nothing's stopping you. And as a matter of fact, the good thing about this whole thing is that Question 3, if it passes on November 4th, we get to substitute our good tax cap for their phony tax cap, but we get to keep all the goodies, which is the surtax speed up, the change in the, there's a business tax cut in there, the increase in the exemption, the stabilization fund.
I'm trying to find out why it's a phony tax cap, and I'm not coming to grips with why it's a phony tax cap, because I don't really know the difference between the tax cap you propose and the one that Susan
Well, you're not
the stabilization fund is a very important
That's why they did it at the last minute, so no one has any time to analyze it till after the election.
You know we would have liked to have done it a long time ago, so the last minute was not planned.
Why didn't you? This thing has been, we've been on the ballot, you know, since May.
Because it's difficult to make plans on tax reform that are very carefully thought out.
Yes, it's
and
so
the thing about the
carefully thought out
petition,
that no one even knows what's in it.
The stabilization fund, yes, it's true. You can't have it in an initiative petition, which only proves that you shouldn't be doing tax reform on the ballot, because there are some things that you're not allowed to do.
That's what they said about Prop 2.5 when the League opposed 2.5, saying that it would destroy services in Massachusetts forever.
It didn't destroy it because the state was able to make up for all the losses at the local level.
Which is what they were supposed to do, which you would have known if you'd ever invited us to any of your forums to discuss the subject.
Do either of you think, and I guess the answer from CLT would be obvious, but maybe not so obvious here, that the legislature would have enacted a tax limitation measure at all if it were not for the petition drive that was going out there? That is, if this had never been started, would the legislature have been meeting to say, hey, let's limit taxes, Susan?
I don't think that that's really an issue. We have one. We have what the people want. We have repeal of the surtax, and we have a tax cap.
Of course it's the issue. It's the entire
other thing, when
issue.
Barbara says they can have all the goodies on November 5th, she's giving a lot of credit to the legislature that just a week ago she was not giving to the legislature. So we do have a tax cap now, and that's what the people wanted. and so they
But
should
it's a
vote no
law.
on question
I mean,
3.
they passed it, the governor signed it. The only thing that we supersede is the tax cap. The rest of it continues to be on the books, so we get to keep the stabilization fund. The surtax repeal, of course, will again be repealed after the election because legislative leaders have promised to do that. If, however, we're wrong...
Which legislative leaders have promised to do?
George Kavarian, Pat McGovern, Richie Vogt, Jack Flood. But if, for any reason, they don't do this, we can always have an initiative petition to repeal the surtax back to the Civil War if we have to. So it's going to be done. The surtax is going to be gone. If people vote yes on question 3, they'll also have an excellent tax cap, and that is what we certainly hope they'll do.
The Globe is on one side of this issue, your side. The Herald is on the other side of the issue. The Globe says that people who are in favor of your petition, Barbara, don't trust the government. They're cynics, and they would rather go out to the people and get them to exercise it, and therefore it's undermining representative government. What about that? Is it?
Yeah, the Globe said that you have to really trust your government. The state legislature has been around since October 25th, 1780. That's 206 years. Never showed the slightest interest in tax limitation until a week and a half before the election, and suddenly they pass a tax cap. Now, what is to trust in that kind of manipulation?
Susan?
Well, I've never heard Barbara document that they have never talked about a tax cap. I'd like to see that historically proven that...
Do we have one on the books? They've never passed a tax cap
They could have
before.
passed a tax cap and repealed it. I mean, who knows? You always bring that up. But I don't know.
We've only got about 15 seconds, so this is probably an unfair time point to make. But why is a tax cap a good idea? I mean, both of you now think it's a good idea.
Everyone thinks it's a good idea.
Why is a tax cap a good idea?
Because if you don't have one, they tend to overspend in good economic years, thereby spending themselves into a fiscal crisis when the economy slows down.
So why don't we throw them out when they overspend? I mean, we have a mechanism to throw them out. We have elections. Let's get rid of them if they overspend. And
I think that's a good question. Why don't we throw them out? And I don't think that anyone is in favor of overspending. We've only been in good economic times in Massachusetts for a couple of years, and we should take advantage of those times to be able to plan for the future so that we can meet all the needs of the future. We want to be able to keep the Massachusetts success story going, and we are going to be able to do that with this tax cap that's just been
There's
passed.
going to be a tax cap no matter what we do. The
That's
question
right.
is whose version, and that the voters are going to decide for us on November the 4th in the referendum. Are we right about that?
That's right.
You're right
Okay,
about that.
great. Thanks to the both of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, David.
Okay, we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. We're going to take a look at some of the problems in Central America, so come on back.